We're live on Lunchbreak. So I shared a funny, cute dog video thing invention in the chat. We can begin our lunch break off with a little dose of dog
Oh,
cuteness
that's so cute. Oh my God.
and inventiveness.
Wow.
Do you know this woman,
No.
Simone Geertz? So she's funny. She actually is kind of notorious. I mean, notorious. I don't know if that's the right word. She's funny though. She makes these like robots that are kind of like purposely a little broken, I guess,
Yeah.
but they're meant to be kind of like funny. They're it's a little bit nerd humor, I guess, and just it's general entertainment. She actually has quite a big YouTube channel where she makes these things. But this one's actually like very. I mean, it seems very useful. Most of her stuff is kind of. I don't know if she would call it this way, but it's almost like she designs it a little bit to fail in surprising ways.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but like I'm looking through like the soup robot. I'm just trying to find an example of one of her.
Wait, these are so funny.
Yeah,
Is she like what was she, like a carpenter or something? Like a, just like tinkerer? She started doing this?
I'm not sure what her background is. I thought she was
Yes,
an engineer,
inventor,
maybe.
maker, robotics enthusiast.
Yeah.
Previously worked in MMA, sports journalism.
Oh, she did. Oh, wow. Okay. Did not know that.
That's cool.
I somehow had I somehow had thought that she had was she professionally working as an engineer at some point or no?
She
Maybe
studied
I
engineering physics, dropped out after a year, started creating useless inventions,
okay.
inspired by the local open source hardware community in Stockholm.
Okay, cool.
Haha, that's cool.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, she has I think she was also famous for a TED Talk that she gave. Um, why you should make useless things, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So obviously we won't watch the whole thing here, um but I think that concept is is fun and interesting. And I don't know exactly. Let's see. The true beauty of making useless things is the acknowledgement that you don't always know what the best answer is. Geert says it turns off that voice in your head that tells you that you know exactly how the world works. Maybe a toothbrush helmet isn't the answer, but at least you're asking the question.
Hmm.
Which I think has like huge. I mean, I think there's just like something beautiful to learn and think about from her idea here because it's part of, I mean, this theme we talk about a lot is like how do you free people up from the expectations of what we're supposed to do and
Yeah.
give people freedom to try new things. And I think that's essentially like what I think she's like, she's sort of making an argument to even take it a step further to like intentionally make useless things just because of the discovery process. And it's both fun and you might discover new things through that process that inspire you to do other things. And so
Yeah.
it kind of lowers, I think it lowers the burden for creation to say like I'm trying to make something that's bad, bad and like I'm trying to make something non-functional or useless.
Yeah.
You sort of you lower the burden so that people can't come and say, oh, I don't like what you did there. You're like, well, you weren't supposed to like it, you're supposed to think it's stupid.
Yeah, exactly. I
which
find that
then
with
means like
learning anything
you're
new,
free. Yeah.
it's kind of, you don't want to like not believe in yourself, like actually, but I think it's easier to present kind of just like, yeah, I'm just kind of playing around
Yeah.
and laugh at yourself and make a little bit of humor out of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the more that we can, I think, just like play and see what inspires us, like where we have energy or where we're sort of naturally drawn. That seems like the more
Yeah.
that we can find, our paths to be more creative and and creativity is like broadly defined, make things for the world that help other people, I guess, or I don't know, make
Yeah.
things that help you tell your story.
Yeah.
Creativity can be lots of things.
Yeah.
I haven't been, now that I'm here on TED looking at her thing, I'm realizing I haven't been on TED in a long time, and I'm wondering why that is. I feel like I used to watch the videos all the time, and I don't know if people
Yeah.
don't
Me
share them
neither.
as frequently, or
Do you see this thing on the bottom, new activity feed? And then if you click on it, you get a little pop up saying these
is
people are
this
recommended.
on the bottom of the video I
Just on the
shared?
bottom of this link, like it's like a little pop up. I don't know if it's just on mine, but on the
Oh, yeah,
bottom
yeah,
right with the arrow,
I do see that. Yep.
it's kind of interesting.
Huh.
It's like a universal feed of
Right.
everyone's account here.
Now, so how do you think this works? Because when I look at it, I
I'm not
see.
logged in, or I don't even have an account, so I just see random people's stuff.
Okay, I assume I'm either. Well, I'm not logged in. I assume I may not have an account. I may or may not. I don't know. But I'm seeing like Kenneth Nwokoro. Is that the first one you see?
Yeah,
So 3 hours ago, and I've got to imagine, just given the volume of you know videos and people watching and stuff, that there's probably something that happened in the most recent 3 hours. So presumably, this is like a person on the platform who they trust to give. Well, actually, now that I'm looking at it in his profile, I went to. So he's a TEDx organizer, so maybe that confers some status. Um, but I see this is like the one and only recommendation he's made, and he doesn't have any likes, um, meaning he hasn't liked anything else on the platform.
yeah.
So I'm curious, how does this feed get constructed? And I wonder what, yeah, like I'm clicking down on a few other ones. I wonder what people think or expect or hope to get when they participate here. Like, is there a, is there a vibrant discussion community here, or is this kind of one-off commentary that people make from time to time?
I'm not seeing like actual back and forth discussion. I'm trying to look around.
I haven't seen any yet. I wonder if we were to go to like go to like some of the most famous ones of all time. Let's see. Okay, I'll go to. There's a March 2021 with Bill Gates. I don't really see a discussion happening here. Maybe it's because I'm not logged in. Maybe that's really only if you're logged in.
jean shorts.
You talking about your jorts?
I'm actually wearing real people clothes today, and it's a big event.
Sorry.
You're good. I'm usually in the same pair of like running shorts I've had since middle school. What is this YouTube video? How to make jorts? Oh
We used
my
to go. We used to go. A friend of mine hosted a party, or kind of like a little weekend away once a year up in Tahoe, and we would bring up. There's like floating down the Truckee River. You can like bring like inflatable rafts and whatever, and just kind of hang out. And we would
Yeah.
always like take jeans and cut them to turn them into jorts. Like take an old pair of jeans that you're no longer going to
Yeah.
wear, and make your own jorts out of them.
Wow.
I haven't seen this tutorial video, but it looked relevant.
That's amazing.
Make your own jorts in 2 easy steps.
Step 1, have jeans. Step 2, cut them. Amazing.
I like how seriously he takes it.
Yeah.
Pretty funny. I've never heard of this guy, Brian David Gilbert. He has
I know.
728,000 subs.
1.7 million views. Wow.
Mm. Just before lunch break got started, I tweeted this thing. I don't know if you saw the Renaissance Collective newsletter
Oh yeah.
that we just published.
Oh yeah. I haven't read it yet. I'm gonna look at it right now.
I forget if you and I have chatted about the Slack 10,000 message limit and the community problem around it. Is that something we've
A
discussed?
little bit, yeah. And then I know you tweeted about it this weekend. Did anything else come up out of that, by the way?
So there was the kind of migration idea, like how do you migrate from Slack to Discord was kind of, I think, what the tweet that I wrote was asking about. And I think from that, I didn't find any like simple tools. It seemed like there was one tool that looked like it was built by a company that was trying to just kind of get the attention of people doing that migration. So it was like you had to, install packages from package managers, and it was kind of like a bunch of, kind of command line configuration, and not as much like click, 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 and done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, this NBA thing is crazy. I It wasn't even following the whole thread.
Are you reading the thread right now?
Yeah.
And this is public, right? So we can share it. There, I just shared the doc. So, wait, did I share the right thing? Yeah, okay. There's something about the way, so Jen replied actually on Twitter. Definitely something here Conversations capture gut reactions, enable follow-up questions in nonlinear fashion, build layered nuances, others chime in. Potential problems, people converse differently if they know a thread might be public. One thing, I was playing around with this format with Jen yesterday and trying to think about it and form a point of view on it. And one thing I noticed, I think one thing I noticed is that if I know a thread is there in kind of this format, then I'm not sure, I almost feel like I can't interject. I kind of need to read the whole thread before I would, just reply to somebody in line the way I might in Slack.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel like I need to catch up if I'm going to. By the way, I just DM'd Jen, so we'll see if she's interested to discuss. She showed up, so I assume she was responding to the DM.
Okay.
Yeah, so the stuff we were talking about is how if we're reading through, a discussion like what is the value of the MBA? Oh, hi, Jen.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
how's it going?
Welcome to Lunchbreak. We were tweeting about you, and then we're talking about your ideas.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm so impressed at these two wikis, the MBA one and the OKR one. Just so much depth there. Like I didn't even follow the entire thread on Renko, but wow, these could be like mini booklets in and of themselves.
This question of the MBA, like, and whether to get one, has been asked by so many people. And then we wanted to document this thread because it just keeps coming up again, and the same people keep having to reshare the same advice.
Yeah.
And so having it be a living document where people can continue to share their experiences as they go through the application process or as they make this decision themselves. So the question asker right now can be like in the future, 6 months from now, the question answerer, and they can update their understanding of the value of an MBA and change their answer. So part of the points of having it be in a Google Doc was so that it's living. It's a living, breathing doc where not only we can bring in additional voices who have different perspectives to share, but also allow the original person who answered the question update their answers as they get new knowledge.
And we're talking about some of the things that work and some of the things that are challenging about the format, just because we wanted to try to explore it more deeply. And so, I think one of the things for me when I was reading kind of a preview of this the NFT thing last night, and in reading that, I felt like I wasn't sure exactly where I could dive in or interject. So I felt like because this group of people has already kind of prosecuted this idea, if I, interjected something that was already sorted out by the group, I'd feel a little bit like awkward, like it's kind of already sorted later in the thread. So just, so I felt like I kind of had to get through it once in order to be able to make a credible contribution, even if my idea to contribute would be somewhere higher up.
Right. I know you kind of disagreed with the initial, the implicit assumptions that people were making pretty early on. So you would have had a very divergent thread if you had interjected early on, and people could you can almost see it as two thought bubbles that appear side by side. One thread goes as prosecuted, and you can offer an alternative thread where it's like, well, if we assume, this set of assumptions, then how does that move the conversation forward in a different direction? And so, I shared that with you, and I decided not to share that more broadly, since I think your comment was that we had some pretty not fully informed understandings of NFTs. And still, I think the good thing to come out of that was that, we're like, okay, let's get together and discuss it live. And so even just having that out there and having you respond, okay, we're going to host a discussion with this. And then Stan's like, I'm going to bring in my friend who's an art philosopher and a professor. And just recently wrote about this, having that out there still brought, more voices into the conversation, even if it's not on the page in the way that we wanted to test in this asynchronous, medium of chat and conversation.
Right. So that's I think there's at least two ideas that are, I'd say kind of let's say sort of pending, or along this thought train, let's say. One is, there's all this discussion that happens, and you're saying that organic behavior, you notice, is that we are like, hey, let's just all get together and have a live discussion, and then we can try to hash it out there. So that I think makes sense.
Yes.
As one path to further understand it. I think the other one that Jen, you and I were discussing offline, but that might be worth exploring, is I think when you have that whole thread, the thread is in a sense, the demonstration that there's energy for people to collaborate on figuring this out. Mm-hmm. But the actual text that everybody says in that demonstrates the energy may not be the right thing to publish, because it might be like, well, I don't know that I want to represent that publicly, or I want to refine my ideas first, or we want to structure it into our collective idea instead of...
no one wants to do the work of structuring. Right. It is too heavyweight and totally unscalable for one person to take on that work of structuring all of this. I could do it. Mishti could do it. Anybody in Renko is smart enough to do that work of taking a Slack thread and structuring it into a blog post. But, at some point you just want the information there in raw form to engage with it when you need it. You want to be able to search a thread, scan it quickly for relevant ideas, engage with the ideas that you want to, disregard the rest. And the NFT one was particularly raw. It's such a, the two I ended up sharing, the MBA and OKRs one, people have experience with that, and they have very informed perspectives that they brought to the table in those discussions. Whereas with the NFT one, what I was trying to show was that, we in these private communities can be vulnerable and explore very raw ideas together and collaborate on coming to some common understanding of it. Then, we may converge at the end. I remember you asking me last night, am I supposed to come away after reading this, agreeing with the final conclusion? And you're like, well, no, but you can see through the conversation thread how this one person started digging really deeply into it. And then by the end, he kind of disagreed with the things he presented in the beginning of it. Right. And you see an evolution of thought. That's awesome. And that's one of the interesting things that, a transcript of a chat conversation does for you. You can see, a testing and exploring, sort of this presentation of a raw instinct or a gut reaction, and then how having others challenge you and present new information. Amit is always so good about sharing lots of resources that he's read. They tend to be New York Times heavy since he works at the Times. But, he's so well read and he always presents new information to the conversation. And then Stan reads a lot of philosophy papers. And so everyone's input, and these are high quality sources being shared because you've got people, high quality people sharing them, Yep. So that one was really like, how do you come to an understanding and explore an idea together, coming from very different perspectives. And, it doesn't need to reach a conclusion that we all agree upon. Sure. If I read a blog post that didn't come to a conclusion and was as unstructured as the conversation, I would be underwhelmed, and one of the problems I think with this chat thread on NFTs is that, the signal to noise ratio was a little bit off, I think, to present to people, because it was such a raw, let's get in there and tackle this together.
Yeah, but I think therein kind of lies the opportunity. So if you pause for a second on exactly who is going to do all the parts of it, because I know it's a lot of work to actually structure these things. But I would say there's if you've got 6 people in a place all hotly debating a topic, sharing resources, trying to process it, I'd say that's demonstration that there's energy, that some set of people want to figure that out. And then just pause with that. There are people in the world who love to write. They post blog posts every day or week or whatever. And I think there's people who are from a community like Renaissance Collective who have discussed ways to do collaborative writing and that sort of have desire and appetite to do collaborative writing. And so, is there a way, I don't think you can just get everybody who participates in the thread to then all of a sudden, agree to have the whole thread published, but also having the thread published isn't necessarily it doesn't have the quality that I would hope for out of, the end result. But having signaled that there's interest enough to engage in this, and there's there's 6 people who care about it. There's probably 6,000 or more who care about it. So you kind of have very strong signal. You have collaborative pre-writing, call it, or kind of idea jam. Can you take that energy? Maybe only 2 of the people want to work on the thing, or maybe all 6 want to, or maybe you pull in another dozen or half dozen who want to, but you kind of have the beginnings of a collaborative blog post that then doesn't have to just be retransmission of the chat, but can be kind of the seed for the post began. And now some subset or even superset of people are going to go off and collaborate and write together using some, they would go off and structure those ideas and actually write the post, and it would be kind of collaboratively written, not in chat format, but in more of a traditional blog format, and all 6 authors or whoever participated would have attribution at the top.
I see what you mean. I think that one of the things that keeps popping up in my head when I think about this is I wish I could take each message in the thread and move them around. I wish I could build a map where you take one comment and you're this is a top level bubble, and then there's 5 top level bubbles, and you can see the top level topics, and then you can move the chats that are responses to those bubbles below them. So what you're doing is making a delightful way to create a visualization of the conversation thread, and then in making it, in laying it out like that and creating the structure around the information, you give people natural points to interject. If each bubble had a hit reply, then you could see very easily where you could incorporate yourself into the conversation. I still think writing a blog post together is a lot heavier than what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is enable a chat-like discussion to bring in more participants, and in particular participants who may have more knowledge of a subject than we do. And like basically the idea that you and I discussed around making communities which are private right now a little bit more porous, in conversation. So like the fact that Stan has a philosopher friend who is writing about NFTs in terms of art and philosophy. If you could bring that person in, not to all our Renko conversations, but just on this one, and that person could very easily get a lay of the land by looking at it visually. Like, here are the top 5 level things people are discussing. These are the questions, and here's some of the comments that people have laid out below, and then just like respond to those comments as he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes this spider web of like chat boxes.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of kind of like almost like a Rome research type idea where you've got ideas like these bubbles you're talking about are kind of like little page stubs almost. And maybe there's kind of some interlinking between them, or you sort of grab a chat bubble up and that whole kind of
exactly. Somebody Stan suggested using Rome research for this.
Yeah.
Actually,
it reminds me of this DK, I showed you this a while ago, but this thing I posted in chat, this guy was sort of just like, I think he's a designer or something. He was brainstorming basically like better formats for conversation.
This is it. Yep.
And like kind of down on the page where he has this part, outlines are locally linear, adjacent bullets are adjacent remarks, nesting occurs naturally when an idea goes deeper.
This is exactly what I mean.
Going this way and this way. Yeah.
Oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, this is exactly what I mean. Like, if you can move these thought bubbles around, because what you see in conversation very naturally occurring is like non-linear responses. You're like, wait, so-and-so says something that I want to respond to, but I also want to respond to this other thing that somebody else said. And those two things in your response don't link up.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. How do you create that? How do you make it easy for people to create that together, Mishti?
Right. And how can you sort of bootstrap it or play with it without, I mean, building this would be like a whole project, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Do this, but how can you, maybe with, I don't know, maybe Figma, I was thinking what if you just screenshotted the entire Slack thread, but then on Figma people can like easily move things around. I'm trying to think of the best like lightweight piloting platform that could be useful. I'm not sure.
Oh wow.
Yeah, somebody suggested Rome, but they were like, it's also very difficult to learn how to use. And so you need a tool that's really simple. Like, I want to actually be able to move Slack comments with people's identities attached into these, like, into these boxes or into this outline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that kind of thread publishing tool, like it seems pretty natural to be able to create a tool to map those identities into a new publishing context and map those into like bubbles. And then how you play with the bubbles and what you structure is sort of I don't know, that's maybe like an open-ended question or piece of this.
But that's delightful for people to do. Like, it's not as much work as it is sort of fun for people to move bubbles around or like to chat response to a bubble.
Right.
It's like just more fun and lighter weight than, writing a paragraph or two together.
Yeah. This thread is interesting comments.
What's that?
This thread is getting some interesting comments. Tom, I don't know how to say it. Critchlow responded.
Yeah.
And Jason Jacobs also.
Oh, Jason responded? I didn't see.
Yeah. Let's see if he wants to come talk about it.
Incredible dialogue, no archive, no knowledge repository getting assembled. Breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's totally true. We have the same problem. But it's not just the static knowledge repository that I'm interested in. I think that among all of us in the community, we have incredible networks. And to be able to bring more people into the conversation, not just store and archive that knowledge to make it searchable to our own community, but include more voices in the conversation so that we can learn from people. So you can imagine if I wanted to respond to one of your thought bubbles and I tagged like 5 other people I knew
Yeah.
that, had done this, and then they got pulled into the conversation, which is something I do on our Slack all the time. But I often wish I could tag people outside the Slack too.
Yeah.
I just want to be like at so-and-so. And so everybody's identity should live somewhere. And like in Google Docs, one of the dangers of doing that is that like, you expose people's emails, like if you tag them, it's like, oh, well, there's their email. Yeah. It's tied to their Google identity. So
that's why, yeah, that's true. That's why Chris was saying he really liked Google Docs, just because like most people have a Google account, so you could tag people in that way. But yeah, I don't know what the best bridging mechanism would be, like inside/outside a community.
Right. Because you almost want the people who started the conversation to be able to curate, to do some of the work of curation, like they can be like, I love this comment. This is totally relevant. Let's pull this person in, and like, it's sort of like what you guys do with the press box, like you want the people who own the conversation, who started it, who are the creators of it, to be able to pull people in and use their discretion and taste to do that. You don't just want it to be like a free-for-all.
Yeah.
I noticed this thing that Tom Critchlow, I'm not sure if I said that right, Critchlow, is working on called Quote Backs. Did you see that?
No.
No, what is that?
It's, here, I'll share the link. So it's sort of in this same space. I mean, he seems to be generally interested in the idea of how groups, his tweet was basically excited about how groups, very much interested in the interplay between communities, publishing, and group knowledge. And so I looked on his Twitter, and he has this thing called quotebacks.net, which is quote, reply, and converse across the open web. So it's sort of like a web highlighting tool, it seems. Has like a bookmarklet, a Chrome extension, Firefox plugin. I might have used the wrong word, but it said quotebacks bring structured discourse to blogs and personal websites. So I think it's kind of like a way to, sort of a meta layer of discussion across the web. But
Charles was just talking about that.
Charles was? What did he have to say?
Should ping him and ask him. He's like, he and I were talking about this, and he's like, we just haven't seen execution on this in the actual technology. Like Google Docs is the V1. I don't know what the V2 is, but there is something there. And he said he's been talking about this with his friends, and they were jamming about the idea of inline commenting for the entire web in a structured way. So looking for a new way to comment across all the information you come across.
Yep. Yeah, it seems like it's been a dream for a long time. I feel like I've seen this problem. I've seen people approach this problem in various ways over the years. Probably not even recalled very well. But do you remember? I think Google had a thing called Google Notebook. It was like a travel along and take notes across the web and sort of annotate the web. You remember Rap Genius?
Part of Chrome?
I think it was before Chrome, possibly. Let me look.
Oh,
There's a Wikipedia of Google's closed products. I think Google Notebook was a free online application offered by Google that allowed users to save and organize clips of information while conducting research online. The browser-based tool permitted a user to write notes, clip text and images, and save links from the pages during a browser session. The information was saved to a notebook. So it was announced May 2006, online May 15th, 2006.
that's interesting. Did you pop the link in? Because that reminds me of, what was that product called? Beams browser?
Yeah, very relevant. Yeah, the one that we saw on the day we talked to Tina, right?
Yeah. Or Gabby, I think, showed us that. Was it?
Oh,
Tina, no, I think you're right.
right, yeah. So this Google Notebook was like an early version of trying to kind of create these annotations, but I think they were more siloed, like personal annotation. And then obviously, do you know Rap Genius, or what's now Genius.com?
Yeah.
So this was another one that was kind of, I think the vision was like annotate the web, but I think the reality is that it was like annotate lyrics was what really worked well.
Oh, yeah,
largely,
I've seen this.
but like the idea of like, using annotations to instigate discussions, I think actually works reasonably well in the Genius context. But well, I'd say it's more explanations of lyrics that works, and I don't know that the discussions are super interesting or I wouldn't say that the discussions are the best part. I think the lyric pages are well done, and then the annotations of those lyrics are well done, but the actual interplay between people, I think, is not a super strong part of it. There's also this one called Hypotheses, hypothes.is, if I recall correctly. Make reading active, visible, and social. So, for obvious reasons, I have a stable of. I actually have somebody shared with me like a huge list of like every web highlighter, annotator, discussion thing ever made. So I feel like it's like this idea that's so compelling and everybody believes in it, knows that it should exist, but there's like a very path-dependent question that is unsolved. And I wonder if, I would suspect that, like you look at Genius or Hypothesis or Google Notebook, and I think they all start from like kind of the website or the tool. And I think the thing that we haven't really seen somebody do is start with the people and let people who are organized use a tool in whatever way they want, right? Like Google never solves good people problems. Google solves good like utility problems. Genius, I would say, is largely a benefactor of a lot of SEO from lyric sites because the other lyric sites were not really that good. So they cleaned up kind of lyric webpage space, but ultimately, like I think a lot of the people come looking for lyrics not because they know each other or have common context or there's no kind of community. You don't come there and connect with people that you already know or have any context on. So I think, and Hypothesis, I think is somewhat similar in that it's kind of, it's a, I think it's like a very horizontal tool, but it's a tool first, not a people organization first. So I like, the directional stuff that Jen is exploring, which is definitely people first, seems like a nice starting point for this kind of thing.
You asked what our like goal would be with doing something like this, and you're like, why open it up to more people? And the goal is actually for everyone to learn. And so, we were not really the right people to be discussing NFTs. Everyone in Renko is really smart and very capable of understanding things, but no one had really dug into this before and has the knowledge that you do, DK. So, or that others do. But if we start people first, then we can start tagging people that we know and bringing them or sharing the link. We don't even have to tag people. We can just share the link and then bring people into the conversation. So if you imagine a seed of a conversation starts with a small group of people, you're just ever expanding it into networks. Like you're growing your trust like slowly and getting signal on people as good participants over time, instead of like doing a, here's a link, we're going to throw it into the public. And, that's a little bit like gladiator style, like, let's see what happens with this. Like, torn apart by the lions, Most of us don't feel safe, having a conversation like that. We would much prefer, like, to expand our circles of trust slowly. Like Mishti, I would talk to any of your friends and, and trust them, because I trust you. So the extension of trust, through our networks could be one way to bring more people in to the conversation.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, either maybe people could be like whitelisted if they have the link to comment. So if you're like texting people, you could text people a link.
Right.
Or if there's some sort of like identity stitched into whatever platform this is, then you could do the kind of ones have access thing.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm really excited about this idea is because I think there's lots of ways to explore it without the tooling, like explore it in the broken way where you don't have a lot of structure. So you learn what structure to create and what kind of tools to help improve the processes that you design outside of the structure. And I think, it's hard for me to point to any experiment I've seen that works that way, in the past, which I think is why we haven't seen this thing solved.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows that Google Docs is the V1 of this.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that's nice that Chris was telling us he liked about Google Docs was that in Google Docs, because it's tied to a Google identity, you don't end up with a lot of people who are like just, flyby spammers or trolls, because it's too easy to just like, if somebody does that, ban them, and then, then you're clean again. Whereas if you have like, any scale of audience without a strong identity system, then you can pretty easily get it kind of spammed and trashed. And you see some of these, like with some of these public art projects, like Satoshi.place. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but it's kind of, maybe I misrecalled, but anyway, it's like kind of a public drawing board. But people, will put kind of, not so tasteful things on it from time to time because there's no real identity tied to it. There's no real, there's not like people to enforce good behavior, kind of suggest good behavior. So what do you think is...
Identity is interesting. I mean, we could talk about that because you can see people, when I sent those Google Docs around for people who had initially participated in the conversation to go through and approve of it, you see people saying, okay, I want to redact what I said, or I want to anonymize. Can you anonymize me? And, I do think that ideas should be able to stand on their own merit. So if people feel more comfortable not being attached to some valid point that they make, what you see is like very candid advice being shared. And, some things that might be more sensitive to share. And so allowing people to, turn it off, turn it on, get visibility for something they want visibility for, but, opt out of having their identity shared it would be like a great feature of this. if possible.
That's
it shouldn't
cool.
always be tied to your Google identity being shared. Although, yeah, for sure, that keeps spammers out.
Yeah, I think
Right.
as long as the platform. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say maybe that could also be dependent on who is viewing. Like maybe within Renko, everyone can see your name, whoever has that Renko identity, but and maybe even their plus ones can see your name, but like publicly you can choose to have your name anonymized, or maybe like you can even edit it per message or have like a finer degree of control where for some ideas you want to be publicly
Exactly.
visible as a proponent, but for some you don't.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of the platform. Like if we can trust a platform with the identities, then the platform can have maybe the default, public identities. But if you want to, you can go off the record. And as long as you trust that the platform knows that this is not a spammer, you don't actually need to know who the person is. So I think we've seen that model. Quora, I think, has done like the best job of that at scale, where you could, for any given question, you could write an answer that you want to go anonymous with respect to that question page, and then as long as you trust Quora to keep your identity anonymous, you're fine. And then as long as consumers trust that Quora's, only letting there's like effectively like a DMZ of trust between the readers and the writers. And as long as you trust that Quora is doing the right thing, I think Souffle Club plays with this idea a little bit differently, but also relevant around how. I mean, I think fully anonymous things often tend to degrade very quickly. So we've seen like the yik yaks and secrets of the world. Just it doesn't work to be fully anonymous. Just always degrades. But I think anonymity as a feature among a trust platform, I think, does work.
Yeah. Or like, like if a person participates multiple times, it's what Mishti was saying. Like, you should be able to turn on and off your identity at, at particular points in the conversation. Like 9 out of 10 of these comments that I made in this thread, I'm happy to share and have it associated with my identity. The 10th one actually has some sensitive information pertaining to where I've worked in the past, and I'd rather hide my identity for that one.
Right. And I think when you do this in a collaborative environment, there's a lot of potential for identity leak. Like if you have those 9 messages and then the 10th one goes anonymous, but then it becomes like, any observer could kind of piece together the through line of whether it's through the language used or, there could be language patterns that are statistically significant or even just like references. I mean, those, just you have to assume that, on the internet, somebody will run a statistical language algorithm to try to to try to figure out. So the Quora model is kind of, in a sense, it's not perfect, but it anonymizes everything you say with respect to a particular question page. So you couldn't say 9 things I say are fine and the 10th one is anonymous. Like 9 are identity visible and the 10th is anonymous. It's more like everything related to this question, I'm off the record. I'll say it, but I'm off the record. And that makes it harder to piece together, kind of those details. Yeah. So
like, do you think people should, in this kind of structure we're talking about, should people ever be able to be completely anonymous to everyone? Or is it like at least someone or some group knows who you are for the sake of like cross-platform credibility? Maybe like everyone in Renko can see who you are for a particular thread, but you can mask from other people? Or should it be like anonymity is possible all the way down? Because that's when platforms probably run into like trolling and stuff. Or maybe it's like limited anonymity where people can see like this is another Renko member because they're the only people allowed to comment, but we don't know exactly who it is, so that's fine.
Yeah, I think when you get into the partials, it can complicate things in terms of like workflows and expectations, and you reveal little breadcrumbs that could be kind of correlated, whether statistically or just through the information. So I'm cautious of trying to be too fancy here. Like I think if there's I'm kind of like, at least my natural inclination is to think about kind of the Quora model for these threads. Like if you were to post, say you had like a post bot that would take the thread from Slack and run some workflow before publishing it out. It seems like that post bot should be able to have like all or nothing for the purposes of that thread, which then show up on that published page. And we don't try to do too much in terms of mixing. Yeah, I think it just like can complicate things. So like simpler seems cleaner. Because if you reveal a Renko member but anonymous, and then like, do you have to have at least 5 Renko members participate in the thread before you say that? Or if there's only 2, does it become obvious who's who?
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to just, even with simple models, I think there's still risk, but trying to mitigate risk as much as possible. I think keeping it like kind of a step of platform trust seems a model. Like you trust that Quora is not going to reveal the identities, and then you try to do your best to
agree. And within the community, I think you just trust that other communities, when you pull a thread out from private and make it public, you trust that other people in your private community aren't going to reveal your identity in the thread that you wanted anonymized.
Yeah. But so what would be the best way of bootstrapping this right now? Like so for this, copy pasted literally just a thread from Slack onto Google Docs, and now I guess we can see like what happens, but now it's out there for people to sort of comment and add their perspectives. Oh, here's Asad also. I don't know if he has any thoughts.
Yeah, I'm not expecting people to know what to really do with this. I mean, DK looked at this and he was like, I don't know where to jump in,
Yeah.
But, I think it would be helpful, Mishti, if you had comments, to jump in and start putting in some comments, because a very good hostess once told me that when you serve hors d'oeuvres, you should always be the first to take one as a hostess, because it makes
model what you want people to do. Yeah,
it makes everyone else a lot more comfortable taking something off the tray.
Yeah.
So like when you have cheese, like you should always cut off a square, or cut out part of it to show that like that's okay, know. So I think if we wanted people to comment on it, we should start commenting it.
Totally, yeah. Also, hey Asad, how's it going?
Hey Asad.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
How's it going?
Hey. We're just jamming on this like public wiki idea. I don't know if you had any thoughts. Did you see what Renko newsletter / Jen shared this morning?
No, I just started catching up on Slack, and I saw that you guys were jamming on this, and I was like, "Ooh, this would be an interesting conversation." So let me go read up real quick. Give me like 1 minute.
Yeah. I'm trying to share the link to the newsletter itself. Let me find it.
And in the meantime, while Asad is catching up, I wonder, kind of, Jen, if you already have in mind what sort of, it sounds like the hors d'oeuvre thing would suggest maybe you, me, Mishti can kind of model some of the ideas that you have in mind around how you like this to work.
Yeah, I already left a comment for Robbie in the MBA one where he was, and Asad, you were in that one.
Yeah, I'm in the MBA one to try to. I sent an initial draft to Nyama to see what she thinks, and we're going to iterate on that. But yeah.
A draft, like, are you guys writing a blog out of this, or doing something a little more structured? Oh, that's cool.
Probably a blog on MBA or to MBA or to not MBA. I think, to the point of like conversations and communities that have curated conversations or can have better ways of archiving, or kind of this entire universe of thinking. I still just really love Reddit. I love how Reddit, despite its, you have to find, like, I think you need, if you go searching for nastiness, you'll go find nastiness up there. But if you go searching for normal stuff, you can find it, and in a public, unpaid, moderated format, it's still somehow manages to create good content, push it to the top of the channel. So I just love what Reddit does with that. It's searchable. Nothing happens to it. You can. I'm not sure if you can have private Reddit channels. I think you can, especially given the GameStop saga. I think you can. Mm-hmm. But I just love what they do more than Quora or some of these other ones.
Are there any subreddits in particular that you engage with a lot?
On Reddit?
Yeah, any subreddits that you
recommend? The ones I engage with are kind of weird, I would imagine. One is the r/army, so I try to stay up with my army stuff, and that to me is a prime example of a community that's well moderated, because there's a lot of toxic BS in veteran circles. Around, should women be in the service or not, and all this other stuff, and the community does like a really good job of self-policing, where all that stuff is so far down the feed, you see the material that's the most engaged, most commented on, most liked, most upvoted. So I like that one the most. I think that's where I spend most of my time, and then
I'm curious on
r/finance.
I'm curious if I ask you on the Reddit one, do you on the army one, do you find that there's like a strong kind of taste making that feels like you're sort of in a space moderated by a certain set of people with a certain set of taste or norms, or does it feel kind of like a more neutral perspective? Because it's called r/army, right? So it feels pretty canonical, but I wonder, is this one flavor of army, and then are there other ones, and how much does the taste making of the admins play into how it all works?
I think it does play into it. They do a decent job of kind of curating the conversation in a certain way. And I think that's the way the large majority of people seem to enjoy it. And of course, there's the ones who you can always tell, like, every post is going to have those 5 trolls who are going to say something, and you can very easily filter that out, because they'll have like 200 downvotes, and they're like, okay, great, this is one of our resident trolls. But there is some flavor of taste making where they're setting some ground rules. It's not so much about which topics can be discussed or cannot be discussed. It's really more around, hey, we're not going to dox people, we're not going to make certain kinds of attacks, and they do a decent job of kind of moderating that. The other thing I really like about Reddit is some of the bots there have gotten pretty good with archival stuff. Like, some of the bots there can pretty quickly pull up some stuff on, hey, someone else talked about uniform changes in the army or whatever it is.
Oh, that's interesting.
Obviously, the one bot that works really, really well on Reddit is the suicide related bot. So if anyone has any negative kind of commentary or something that they're saying where they're like, oh, maybe I'm gonna hurt myself, or I'm feeling depressed, it's incredibly good at kind of picking up those things. Whatever an NLP it uses does a really good job of automatically, like, hey, here are 10 resources. But Reddit bots are getting like pretty good day by day.
And are those are platform-wide bots? Like, that's something that Reddit builds and administers and is sort of observing and participating in every community on Reddit?
As far as I know, yes. I'll take the Army one as an example. Army people aren't very smart. Well, there's a reason we call it Army Strong and not Army Smart. We're not out there building bots. So,
you're saying this, but is that a generally accepted? I mean, is that the way that the vibe of the community is?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you think about a hierarchy, right? It's like, maybe the generally accepted hierarchy is that the bottom of the IQ pole is the Marine Corps, then it's the Army, and then the Navy and the Air Force kind of take the top two, because they have much more at stake, right? So their dumbest person can run $100 million ship into the ground because they made a mistake. Our dumbest person can jam a $1,000 rifle. Who cares? Lose it, explode it, whatever. they've got much more at stake. So that's the way we look at it.
So I didn't know this at all. I find it interesting. So is this what causes this to happen the way it does? Is it like just historical reasons? Each organization attracts a different type of person, or is there like a filtering or selection criteria, or is it just the economics of what you can destroy if you screw it up? Or
almost all the above. So everyone who goes into the military takes like an SAT type test, and for jobs in the Navy and Air Force, you have to score pretty high on technical aptitude and mechanical aptitude. Like there's a whole section about like how do you repair engines and all this good stuff. So that's part of it. The other part of it is who the services are looking for. The Marine Corps and the Army do most of our fighting on the ground with somebody going to hold some amount of ground. So our fighting unit is the infantryman or the infantrywoman, and their job is to stand there and shoot back at someone. Whereas the Navy and the Air Force, their job from a fighting perspective is, planes and ships and very heavily technology based. Ours is like, hey, can you march 18 miles with 80 pounds on your back and show up still fit to fight? So it's kind of both.
Right. And does that play through the institutions as well that sort of, graduate people into those careers? Is that does this kind of filtering mechanism start? Yeah. Like at what point would you say that selection?
Oh, it's from the recruiter's office, even to things like ROTC, you'll see a lot more MIT grads in the Navy. You see very few of them in the Army. This is not a thing. MIT grads aren't dying to go do ROTC to go join the Army. They will die to go do, nuclear engineering because the Navy needs those. In the Army, like we wouldn't know what to do with them. I
see. Cool. Okay. Interesting. Sorry for the diversion, but so I think you were going to tell us about another subreddit that you're active with, or I think you mentioned finance.
Yeah, finance. Yeah. r/finance is the other big one.
And I'm not super familiar. I mean, I'm familiar with Reddit at a high level, but I've poked around on various subreddits, but I'm not deeply engaged with anyone in particular. So I wonder, when you look at r/army versus r/finance, just in terms of like the abstracts of how the communities form and are managed and how tastemaking works, is there a more clear kind of tastemaking within one or the other? But like, what's not allowed in finance?
I think there's probably more of that tastemaking aspect in the Army one because they're kind of coalescing around an identity. The finance one is a lot more about, hey, we'll post the latest finance news or something, and people will comment on it and discuss it. So that the flavor there is very much exchange of kind of maybe news and concepts. Here it's talking about a shared experience, and folks will be like, hey, I'm in this situation. I have a young female soldier, and I've never had a female soldier before, and I don't know how to mentor her. So there'll be something like that. So I think that's where a little bit of that difference comes in. But yeah, I think I've seen in both flavors. I've seen enough of the community building there where I think it is doable with the masses, right? Like none of these communities are paying people to go do this. They're not, no one's writing out like a Satoshi style manifesto saying, hey, here's what our army will be. It kind of evolves on its own to get there. And I think that's the super cool aspect of it. Because I've tried doing the community moderation thing with the veterans community I run, with the alumni group I run, and it's just impossible. Like it's like pulling teeth at times to get folks to engage. But I find it like really easy how on our on most subreddits people just engage.
And the engagement just happens because there's probably like a large volume of people, I assume, relative to like I think sometimes a smaller volume might be more challenging in a public forum.
Yeah, I think a large volume of people. It's easy to engage on it. There's no engagement could be as simple as clicking upvote. So it's easy to engage on it, and there's enough content that you can engage with. So I think it's probably all of the above.
Structurally, how does the Reddit conversation? How do you think the actual structure of how Reddit conversations and nesting works compared to Slack? Like, what's good and useful about each? Because I was sharing this before, which is sort of like a comic where this guy is reimagining conversational nesting and stuff. And he has, if you scroll down, he talks about Slack and also Reddit and what's suboptimal about those mechanisms. I wonder what you have found about those.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what Reddit's limit is. That I think is up for debate. I think the thing that Reddit does well and could potentially not do well is the order of your feed by default is ranked by popularity and not by time. So it's not temporal. It's just, hey, here's what's getting the most engagement. So, for a community like us, that might be really bad because you might have like someone saying, hey, I need advice in some very esoteric industry, and we happen to have another Renko member in that very esoteric industry, but maybe Reddit would push that so far down the feed that no one would see it for days. But I think the part of what I like around Reddit relative to Slack is searching in it. I've generally found to be a little bit more helpful. But what I found really helpful is there are wiki bots that you can link. So there's like a README page where it'll be like, hey, here are the rules, but then also here's like our golden gems for here's where we store all our templates, here's where we store how-to guides, and the bot will kind of quickly pick up and say, ooh, you asked about, for example, in the Army we have these things called officer record briefs. Like, ooh, you asked about ORBs. Like, here's the wiki section about ORBs. So that part, I think it does really well. That's not a conversational piece. That's back to the bot piece. But I think the part about Reddit that maybe doesn't work well for us is the popularity thing.
Yeah.
I guess there's always a tension between like recent versus popular. So is there like a new way to think about that, the trade-offs that exist there?
Yeah, I guess the one difference I'll point out there is Reddit includes upvotes, I think, as popular as engagement. So it's not just how many comments or how many replies there were. But I think Slack kind of loses that. So you could have someone like post a question, and someone could do like the thinking emoji, this one, and like right. That doesn't mean engagement. That doesn't algorithmically in Slack. That doesn't mean anything. I can't search by like. Right. Who is thinking the most about a post or something.
Right.
So.
Right. Or which post received the most thoughts about him or something. I actually it reminds me of another thing that Jen and I were discussing around using emoji as a way to trigger actions in Slack. So the idea, one of the challenges I think that I've heard a lot around how Renaissance Collective and Jen uses Slack is that there's a lot of activity that happens every day, right? Like tons of messages going through and lots of excitement to discuss many things. And I think there's not really a good way to distill it all into the very best stuff or the stuff that the community might want to showcase or highlight in some way. And so I think Jen has spent, very long, I think, what was it, like 40 hours or 80 hours or some, tremendous amount of time trying to curate what is happening in Slack to help people get to the sort of the highlights or the sort of here's the best bits that are going on. And so is there a way to say, I was proposing, could we create an emoji that anytime there's a particularly newsletter worthy item that anybody in the community could use the newsworthy item emoji to flag that, and then maybe that gets triggered into a channel, and that becomes the set that Jen can hopefully only spend 30-40 minutes, curate from that set, and then kind of have the overview of what's going on in the community kind of generated by the community, which is kind of a balance, sort of maybe surfaces some of the balance between the popular versus recent, kind of the structure of Slack is obviously very recent oriented, not popular oriented at all. But I wonder if there's something in between.
Yeah, that's cool.
You mean the idea of designing a custom emoji so that anybody can curate using the emoji what should go in the newsletter?
Yeah,
like the channel called newsletter updates, and pretty much no one uses it. even though I keep calling for people to and tagging people to post things that they would like to be considered for the newsletter in that channel, and I'll announce it in the channel, but nobody really uses that. So the proactive step of actually posting an update or something newsworthy, no one does. But maybe if it's just like emoji signal, something you think should be included, that would get more traction.
Yeah, I wonder, it's certainly possible that people just have no appetite to help with this, but it might be that you just need like a lower friction way that people actually have the appetite if it's easy enough to express an idea. And when I think about, having to like copy and paste a thread or somehow forward a thread to another channel and understand the mechanics of when I can do that and how that works, that feels like I might spend the time and figure it out, but then my learning or excitement about that is harder to get shared more broadly. Whereas if if there's like some custom Renaissance Collective newsletter emoji, and Jen, you can model the behavior just like you take in the hors d'oeuvre case. You can actually be like, I'm going to newsletter emoji this, and I'm going to newsletter emoji this, and I'm going to newsletter emoji that. And people start seeing that, and they're like, oh, that looks like a Renaissance Collective specific thing. Like, how does this work? What is this? And it'll just show up in the channels that people are already reading, versus having to like learn about the copy paste or the forward behavior to this new channel. Maybe a side effect is that when you do that emoji, or once 5 people emoji that, then it shows up in the curated channel. I think there's a separate issue, I think, Jen, that you were pointing out when we discussed this, is that because of the Slack 10,000 message problem, if you were to forward things to that other channel, it might get quickly dissipated in the in the ether of non-paid Slack accounts. So there's probably yet another Band-Aid required to solve that. But I wonder if the first thing works, if the emoji thing works as a curation mechanism, I'm sure the other one can be solved. So I'm more curious, can you make it even lighter weight to contribute that curation or interest because of the downstream benefit it gives you to curating your overall newsletter? Do you think people would use that? Does that seem like
it would have to
enough?
go somewhere, right? Like it's got to be a Zapier integration or some kind of like thing where emoji, newsletter means means that information gets exported and stored somewhere else. It shouldn't be just gets like thrown into a separate Slack channel. Right. Then you're back to that Band-Aid problem of you don't know how long it'll last before I decide to publish another newsletter. Yeah. Don't get to these things every week.
Sure, but I mean, assume that those can be solved because every one of those is solvable. The question really, I think, I
think that the behavior would be no problem. I mean, Assad, would you, Mishti, you guys are both in Renko. Stan, would you guys emoji things like newsletter worthy if you saw a comment that you thought was good?
100%.
Yeah, I think that's cool because it's another sort of incentive mechanism for just like posting thoughtful things in there, because I think people would, if they got newsletter emojied a lot, feel pretty good about that.
Right.
Yeah, it's actually a stronger signal of appreciation.
Yeah.
That I think people would take pride in like giving and receiving. Like not only is this funny or good, but it's so good that I think it belongs in our newsletter. That's a pretty, it's like a peer bonus or something. It's like really a real pat on the back. Yeah. I think it actually could set new culture, even though it sounds subtle, but I think you're right. That could set some new culture. And I think all the downstream problems are solvable, like Zapier integration or send it to email instead of some new channel so it doesn't expire, like blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. That's all solvable, zero risk, totally solvable. The thing that's the question is, I think that's like worth trying to understand is how can that behavior actually work, and can you get the mechanism right and roll it out the proper way and get people excited about it so that it actually becomes like cultural.
I have no worries about that.
All right, then let's just do it.
I have no worries about the behavior change, the culture change. I mean, people give shout outs and write those, like take a lot of time to write those every single day. I mean, and that's a lot heavier of a mechanism of showing that you support and like and endorse something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and people love the visibility that shout outs gives them.
So then it seems like, okay, let's actually solve this then, because I think it would be, I think it's almost like the best. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground talking about various forms of curating discussions across big groups of people and stuff. But I think if you can actually get some of these stubs to work right, that's maybe some of the best early signal. So why don't we figure out what is the Renko newsletter worthy emoji? What does it look like, and when do you start using it, and how do you showcase it to people? Like, I think if you can do that, I bet if we put our heads together this afternoon, we could like get an image that represents that, install it into the Renaissance Collective Slack, and then from there we could look around on Zapier. So, all the rest of the problems are solvable. So actually, let's just get this thing going. Let's just get the thing going, even if we don't have the full back end figured out. Like, let's figure out the front end. It should be super easy, right?
Yeah, making a custom emoji is super easy. The question is, what do you do with it afterwards?
We introduce the behavior and then model it. That's the part I'm not that worried about. I mean, it's kind of like Stan has a draft of shout outs. Stan is also the only person who's always in verbatim, which is our channel that rewards you if you're funny in Slack, entertain the rest of us. It's from Valentine's Eating Club, Mishti.
Oh, that's great.
They would have verbatim, which is like their version of quoting people for funny stuff you say. But yeah, we have several culture things in Renko.
This is great. Actually, did you see Assad's link for
this is
1.8F?
really cool.
This is exactly what we're talking about, right?
So
yeah, so we
like
ran
hashtag.
into the same issue for. So I'm an innovation scout for the Army Reserve Innovation Command, and we have this highly desperate issue because we're all reservists. We're doing this on our own time. We're out there looking for technologies and companies, and so we run into this all the time where it's like, hey guys, I found this really cool VR training startup, and then you're like, oh well, did someone else post anything about VR training? So fuck, like now where do you go find them? And so we kind of tried using this a little bit. We haven't fully deployed it yet, but 18F is a government thing as well. So I was like, oh, cool. Other people in the government are doing this as well. So I think it might be interesting. I just haven't taken it to fruition. And yeah, the custom emojis thing. We have an image of Mattis when he was defense secretary, because for some reason it's like hilarious to us. And so it's like the emoji for that is : Mad Dog : because like one of his nicknames was Mad Dog. So yeah, you can make anything a custom emoji and do whatever we want to make out of it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm shooting this now.
So is there somebody who can doodle up something? I hesitate to take that on because last time I did that, I designed the ugly Renaissance Collective icon that lived far longer than the 20 seconds that I intended it to.
I mean, it could just be the logo or something.
Or something that looks like this. I've got to go soon. But here, where's the chat?
The Noun Project.
Yeah, have you guys ever used the Noun Project?
I haven't, no.
No, what is that?
So, I mean, consultants love icons because apparently business executives love icons and they get really excited when they see icons. So obviously, like every consulting firm has like their internal design repository. When we exhaust our design repository and the partner is like, I need a icon for some dude ordering food on his app because that's not in our design repository. Noun Project has some of the best icons out there with like a public media license, so you can use them and attribute them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there's like definitely newsworthy or newsletter looking icons that could be used from this kind of set. I wonder if there's something of like one of these icons overlaid with the Renko, Slack icon in some way.
Yeah. Like a newsletter with Renko on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah, so why don't we get the behavior going first and just trust that the rest of it, like it'll be solved over the next, days or weeks or whatever. Like
Wait, meaning somebody should create a custom emoji, not me, because I don't know how to create custom design.
If someone has the design, creating the emoji takes 30 seconds because I've done that before. It's a matter of what do we have as the JPEG that I'm going to put as the custom emoji? That's the question.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe just like for speed, start literally with this scroll that Jen shared or something simple.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we post on design and like ask someone to do Figma and blah blah blah. It just might take a while.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, we can do it, and so can Rob Seacat.
I bet even like a Canva would be, one of us could use Canva and probably like coax something reasonable out of it.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's just do the emoji first. Like get the emoji out and like just start doing stuff with it.
If we're going to use the scroll, I can make it like right now, like while we're talking.
Yeah, there's no time like the present.
Exactly. we'll call it newsletter. Newsletter or news. Like, what do we want to call it?
RC News. Yeah.
RC News.
Sweet.
Dan.
I've uploaded custom emoji through the admin console of our highlighter Slack. Like Team Highlighter, we have our Slack, and I've created I've taken a highlighter icon that somebody else created and I've uploaded it. So that part is very straightforward, but yeah, we just need to figure out what should it be, right? What is the visual of it? This Noun project looks very, very reasonable to be like a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the current estimate on the running time? Like, so there's some sliding window in Renko at which a message expires. Is that 24 hours ago, 7 days ago, 30 days ago, 6 months ago? What's the sliding window when a message will be expired because of the 10,000 cap? Anybody on the Renko Slack now?
It's definitely less. Well, I mean, it's usage based, so time based is kind of hard to do, but it's definitely less than like 3 or 4 days because Becca and I were messaging about something like last Thursday, and I was about to be like, "Hey," I went back and I'm like, "Oh, gone from my damn."
Wow,
so,
that's
like,
fast.
Yeah, it is. I mean, total messages, we have 231K.
For all time?
Yeah.
So then you're running 10K messages every 3 or 4 days? I think it's so Stanley's asking, is it 30 days or 10K? I think what it is some sliding window of like the last 10,000 messages you have access to and the 10,000 first you don't have access to. And it doesn't matter if it was created like 5 minutes ago or a year ago. Is my understanding. I don't know if that's actually how it works, but that's my understanding.
Oh, I can't send an image on here, can I?
Also, is there a way to pay like a one-time fee and get all of them?
Subscribe for 1 month and then turn it all off and go back to free.
Yeah, no, literally. Can you subscribe for 1 month, just pull everything you need, and then move to Discord?
It says we have we increased 17,790 messages, so plus 8.2% over the last 30 days.
Sorry, tell me the number again in the last 30 days.
17,790 messages increase over the last 30
So
days.
17,000 messages in 30 days. We'll call it, right now, let's assume you're on a run rate of 10,000 every 2 weeks or so, right? So probably any message which is about a week old, you still have access to. Any message which is 2 weeks old, you may or may not. And then any message 3 weeks old, you most likely don't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Based on like a 17K, recent run rate.
Yeah.
I just went on the Slack website to check. So it's only the most recent 10,000 messages can be viewed. What counts as a message? A one-word message or single emoji are counted the same as a message with 500 words and multiple paragraphs. So, yeah, each of those things, like, it's counting all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And DMs count too, right?
Yeah, DMs count as well, including DMs.
Yeah.
So it's not just like the public thread. It's
right.
DMs, or if you like. So I guess there's almost a disadvantage to posting multiple responses. You almost want to. It's like you want to edit and go collapse all your responses into one view.
you can pull your hair out using the wrong tool. I think you just have to rip the Band-Aid and find the right tool that wants to support the use case that you're going for here.
Wow, I did not realize we had 101 public channels.
So Jen, do you have visibility into, I know as a Slack admin, I've seen emails before, but I don't recall if I see them anymore, but some visibility into the fraction of messages which are DMs versus our public channels?
Mm-hmm.
You do have visibility into them?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm curious, is it mostly public or mostly private or a nice mix?
Nothing in private channels, 0%, always 0%. 56% public, 44% direct.
I see. Private channels. Okay, sorry, I used the wrong word. Okay, so direct. Now I have it in my head.
And
can you tell me the breakdown of public versus direct now?
Yeah, so it's like 50-40. And some it's always public is much higher. So for instance, like this past Saturday, it was 78% public and 22% direct.
Oh, this is day by day.
Yeah.
But if you take like is there a window of like the last week or the last 2 weeks or something?
No.
Okay.
It just does, it has active members weekly and daily, so you can toggle over to weekly and daily. And then public and private, it gives you per day.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally 52-48, 56-43, 54-45. It's pretty mixed.
So maybe slightly biased toward public over DM, but fairly evenly balanced on average.
On weekends, weirdly, people send a lot more direct messages.
That's interesting.
Seems reasonable.
People send like 90% direct messages and 15% public channels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I personally don't do any messaging on the weekends in public channels almost. I'll do like emojis if other people post, but I try to stay offline. And so if somebody direct messages me, I'm like, okay, this is urgent. I'll get to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, weekends are like 97% direct messages.
If I had to guess, like one potential reason could be people are like catching up on various threads and going, oh crap, I should follow up with this person for this open role, or somebody posted something super interesting, so maybe they're setting aside time, or we're doing what I do, which is I hit the remind me later button. and I'll ask it to remind me at a certain time when I can actually like sit and read what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that the net of all these analytics suggests that if you push the newsletter emoji to Slack today, then you have like roughly 2 weeks to solve the backend. Like just, if you push it today, you have roughly 2 weeks to solve the backend before the whole thing expires.
Mm-hmm.
And I think touching on, maybe it was Mishti's idea or question around subscribing, maybe like once there's a transition plan out of Slack, maybe it makes sense to do like a 1 month subscription so that you have access to all of the history and do a one-time export of everything. And then you can finally wave goodbye. See you, Slack. Nice to know you.
People are not super keen on getting off Slack.
Yeah. I mean, Slack's a great tool.
I mean, Assad did a pros and cons for us, right?
I mean, I'm biased towards Slack because I've seen Discord used rather stupidly, but it's also because the Discord channels that we're in were not like were a lot of smooth-brained people, so there were a lot of veterans in there, and so it was like, hey, maybe they're just not using it well, and we were talking about games and like, hey, who's up playing Call of Duty or something, so it wasn't like the very intellectual use case.
What is a smooth-brained?
So smooth.
I didn't know that term.
So I'm going to attribute this to like the internet meme culture of the last 2 weeks, I guess, or 3 weeks, where people are using smooth brain to describe people who are dumb or lower IQ. They're saying, this brain doesn't have as many ridges or something. So that's somehow supposed to be a proxy for like how intellectually you're functioning. So like, there's one group I'm in. It's just a bunch of us military people who play Call of Duty. So we're like, hey, most of us are just doing something very highly unintellectual. So we're not really using Discord as anything other than, hey, who's on? You want to play now? And other stuff like that.
Right. But that sounds like it's kind of kind of an observation about the set of people assembled and the types of activities you do. But if you sort of were to abstract away that from the underlying tool, do you feel like the tool itself has some severe disadvantages relative to what you guys are doing on Slack today?
I think the biggest disadvantage in my mind was the no threading. There are replies, so similar to how in Highlighter I can reply to your comment, but there's no threading, and I think that's probably the biggest one because it's the search feature is robust, but then how do you link messages that this isn't a reply to something else? So that's where I struggle with. If you actually had a good use case, like that's the stumbling block for me is the no threading.
Right.
I wonder if they'll add it. Got a lot of people with that complaint.
All right, guys. This was fun jamming.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm going to go eat some actual food.
Sounds good.
Do it.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, the big downside to Discord in my mind is the threading piece.
Yeah.
I actually don't love the way threads work in Slack because I find once you get into a thread, you can't get deeper into that thread. Like it doesn't have really like a hierarchy within that thread. And so I think what I would really want is something that's a little bit like best of both worlds. That is like you can create a new space ad hoc for the discussion to happen, but then that discussion doesn't itself need to be flat. That discussion itself could have like deeper openings or further. Maybe I'm just talking our book here because that's kind of how we built Highlighter. But
well, so just to be clear, what you mean is that in Slack threading, there's only one level. Like I can't double click. So like if I'm replying inside a thread and there's a thread on cooking and someone replies Indian food, like I can't then sub reply to Indian food and just be a thread on Indian food. the reply is going to everything for cooking. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, in the point I'm making, sort of just to draw the full conclusion there, is that if you have like a small group kind of chatting about a narrowly focused topic, then it's, I think the Slack model works really well because you have like a thread. We spawn a new thread every day when we have like a meeting, and then there's maybe a dozen of us gather around, and then we we share problems that we surface during the meeting into that, and so we can all always have context and references. So if it's like a dozen people, it works fine. I think Discord is built more as like this like open community tool, and so if you had an open community tool and you talk about cooking, you mentioned Indian cooking, but there's like infinite, how many thousands of different varieties of cooking. So, and if you have only a dozen people there, kind of a flat hierarchy makes sense. There's kind of like one thing to follow. But if you actually have like an open-ended conversation that, okay, I want to dive in and talk more with the crew talking about the Indian cooking, and then somebody else wants to dive in and talk more about maybe some cooking utilities or some tools that they bought from some retailer. I think there's, different kinds of ovens, maybe. There's just all kinds of, each one of those could themselves need to fork. And I think in Slack, you probably don't need that as much. I mean, I think you still can need it at a large scale organization, but in the smaller team structure, I think it's less important than in the large community structure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess you can only double click once. You can't go further than that. So
right.
And Reddit actually Reddit can allow you to do as many as you want. So you can sub-thread under as many times as you want. So I'm kind of used to that as well. But yeah, that's a good point.
A friend of mine is building a tool called Threads, threads.com. I just shared the link. And it's kind of making the observation that the problem in Slack exists, and so they want to solve it by having something more of like a Teams tool that allows for more post-oriented discussions, kind of threaded discussions, and kind of the kind of infinite expanding hierarchy, let's say. But it's built, Threads is built around the community use case, around the corporate Teams use case. So it's not going to serve Renaissance Collective use case well. Like the pricing is going to be more Teams oriented versus community oriented. There are a bunch of interesting observations this is cool. They show a match made in heaven, better together. Learn more about our Slack integration. So Slack and Threads have an integration, so you can start a thread from Slack and then pop out and have those kind of deeper discussions and kind of decision-making moments outside of the fast context. In sense, chat, there's this tension that we were talking about, like the recency versus kind of, I don't know, we were calling it popular, but maybe like importance or like stability. Mm-hmm. And so the recency and stability are kind of in a constant tension. I think maybe a way to think about Threads, I haven't talked to Rousseau in a while, so I don't know if this is where his head is, but it appears from the website that there's some thinking on, that Slack is definitely like a high velocity kind of chat context, and then Threads is more like a lower velocity, more kind of the considered deciding space.
That's interesting. But how much of this would Slack just solve if they added like more nested threads, or Discord solve if they added threading? Oh, see you, Assad.
Yeah, Assad, thanks for joining. Yeah, I mean, I think all of these may sound like subtle innovations, but there's the second and third and fourth, decisions that come down that path.
Totally. I just think it's interesting, like, as someone, if you're in the position of deciding whether to found an actual startup,
mm-hmm.
then how do you think about whether it's like too mundane of just like feature addition that this larger incumbent could add or might
Right.
very well add in the future, or if the behavioral cascades, if you do it first and early enough and in the right way, are actually significant enough for you to pursue the idea.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's one that not enough people ask and not enough people talk about. And I would say it's hard to be certain of the conclusions here, because I think history rhymes but doesn't really repeat.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at something like, all right, like let's take a success case like Instagram. When it started, was the very best way to take and post a photo from your mobile phone to Facebook.
Yeah.
It was really hard because Facebook didn't have a mobile app. They were doing their HTML5 pursuit, I think, at the time. And so, is it worth building Instagram when Facebook is kind of this photo feed? And I think we can kind of clearly now say yes, even though at the time,
Yeah.
I was using Instagram as well as other tools, and I think it was a reasonable question like, what, is Facebook just going to build this? So I think one of the questions to think about is like, what are the structural inefficiencies or complications that, the new format or behavior or activity will kind of create, where would it create complexity in an existing system, and you can sort of resolve the complexity by giving up the existing system and focusing on an alternative one here. And I don't know for sure what the right answer is with kind of the, Slack versus Discord versus Threads thing. I mean, they have different flavors of each other. But I think one of the main things is like if you think about designing, if you were sort of, if you didn't know that Threads existed and you're trying to decide, does Threads make sense? I think you could decide, okay, like there's a lot of decisions that should be made on Slack, but the decisions evaporate. It just like falls into the ether. And so you need to use like some sort of starring mechanism or some sort of like curation mechanism to get those decisions all in one place and have a proper way to dismiss them and mark them as done when they're done. So I think that's like one structural thing that feels, pretty different to me. And then if you get if you do that, then you end up with like another series of questions that's like, if you solve that core structure, what else does it reveal? And I think like, simple question, which is complex, is how do you decide what to notify me about?
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's like a thread going on that has like a bunch of hierarchical replies that go off in different sections, do you send me notice about only people who reply directly to mine? Do you give me summaries of everything that happened in that thread? Do you give me summaries of the whole thing, regardless of which branch of that thread it was on? Like, how do you notify me around these important decisions?
Yeah.
And I think those then create more UX complexity. Like,
that's true.
And then what do you email the next day? Do you email the decisions that are not yet done? Do you email summaries of the decisions? And so you end up, I think you find like some interesting missing bit in the world. And then I think, it may end up with like surprising cascading complexities for the existing products, but that you can actually solve in a consistent, coherent way with a new product.
That's cool. Yeah, that's actually a nice example. So starting with this one thing, then kind of like going really deep into one really important behavior, which is what do you get notified about, which Slack also doesn't handle very well at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So this idea, though, now that we're talking about this, I'm like, why is there no like open hierarchical conversation in Discord? Because it seems even more important there, where there's like, presumably there's, many Slacks are dozens to hundreds of people, and there are certainly thousands and tens of thousands, but I think it's probably more common for there to be like dozens or maybe hundreds on a single Slack. I don't know the numbers, maybe they report this, but I'm just saying it's kind of a Teams-based product, right? It's not even clear that it really works well at like a very, very large company.
Yeah.
Whereas at Discord, I think there's probably like, many Discords that are, thousands to tens of thousands, I would bet is like very common. Like maybe I'd almost guess that's like the optimal, that like the product is optimized around the use case where you have like 10,000 people using it. Again, I'm just like making this up.
Yeah.
But it feels like that's kind of, let's imagine Discord is optimized for the 10,000 person use case and Slack is optimized for the 100-person use case. So I think you'd come to like very different conclusions about what to build there.
Yeah.
So in Discord, it seems like you could want to have the more open, public, hierarchical conversation style, so that a thread could live somewhere on Discord. Almost you could like subscribe to them or like star the thread, then it could live in like your threads section of starred threads that you want to follow, and then you could sort of see some sort of update. I mean, but at that point you're building like a feed system, right? You want something, Telepath. Have you played with Telepath, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Telepath is almost like the best version of that kind of like feed system where it opens the things at the right time and collapses things elegantly and helps you traverse and manage like that type of asynchronous threaded discussion with different weight between relationships and stuff. There's a lot going on there that seems, but I don't know why something like I almost feel like Discord should have that style of discussion for, at least for the Renaissance Collective use case.
Right.
I do think the flat replies thing is problematic for a lot of the best discussion.
Why doesn't Discord have threads?
I'm curious what you learned here,
yeah. They're testing but not committed yet 5 months ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, without that, I guess I didn't fully internalize they didn't have threads, but then I'm wondering how, like, Nathan moving everything or every to Discord has worked. They seem to be happy with it, even without threads.
Is that what Nathan, did he recently announce that?
It was a while ago, but I think they switched from Slack to Discord for their work.
Oh, okay.
Communication with people.
This is for their internal, like for every to use?
Yeah.
I was surprised I saw, there's been this rumor about Discord and Microsoft, and I was surprised to see one of the headlines call Discord like the voice chat service, which I think is largely why it was, it kind of replaced this service called TeamSpeak that was kind of a gamer, voice, kind of Skype for gamers.
Mm-hmm.
And Discord came around at a similar time that felt like clunky and old, and they were trying to revive or kind of revitalize through a new tool. But today, Discord feels a lot more like a Slack with an audio chat feature, rather than kind of that being its focus. But I don't know, is that your impression, or?
It does seem like a feature instead of a focus, but I need to get on more Discord channels and explore more.
Yeah. There's a lot going on internet. It's infinitely interesting.
Yeah. But this topic is interesting. Maybe we should try to get some of these people who commented on the tweet on for a brainstorm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, let's do it.
yeah, I bet they'd
All right.
be down.
Well, with that, should we wrap our day
Yeah,
with
sounds
lunch break? Okay.
Sounds-
Good to hang. This was a fun one.
yeah. Talk to you later.
Okay. Well, with that, should we wrap our day
Yeah,
with
sounds
lunch break? Okay.
sounds-
Good to hang. This was a fun one.
yeah. Talk